Keith Richards, born on December 18, 1943 in Dartford, Kent, England, is one of the great icons of rock and roll. But behind the stage light was a man with deep sadness. The greatest sadness in his life was not the near-death experiences due to drug addiction, nor the fierce conflicts within the band, the Rolling Stones, that he co-founded. It was the pain of losing Tara "Jojo" Gunn Richards, his baby son with Anita Pallenberg, who died just 2 months after his birth in 1976 from sudden infant death syndrome. Tara's death left a scar that never healed in Keith's heart. He once recounted in his autobiography, Life, that he could not face his son's funeral, instead choosing to stay on stage, playing guitar as a way to escape reality. But that escape did not erase the feeling of emptiness. As Keith watched his other children grow up, he wondered what Tara would have looked like if she had lived. Would she have inherited his messy hair or Anita's piercing eyes? His sadness was not something he expressed in tears or lamentations, but a quiet darkness that followed him through every note, every cigarette, every drink. He once told friends that losing Tara was the first time he felt like life could really knock him down, no matter how many storms he had survived. Keith Richards' life was a musical journey, one filled with dazzling peaks and dark depths. As the lead guitarist and one of the main songwriters of the Rolling Stones, Keith shaped the sound of rock and roll with iconic guitar riffs like Satisfaction, Jumpin' Jack Flash, and Gimme Shelter. His success was not just in fame or fortune, but in the way he turned his turbulent emotions into timeless music. The Rolling Stones, led by Keith and Mick Jagger, became one of the greatest bands of the 20th century, selling millions of albums and touring for decades. But the road was not smooth. The 1960s and 1970s were a turbulent time for Keith, as he struggled with drugs and alcohol. He was arrested multiple times, faced prison time, and nearly lost his life because of his heroin addiction. Once, in 1977, when Canadian police arrested him for drug possession, Keith thought it was over. Not just his career, but his life. But he persevered, successfully kicked his addiction, and continued to perform. Those failures, painful as they were the material for his songs. He sat alone in the studio, crying silently while writing Angie, not because of the song, but because he felt like he was losing himself in the darkness. Keith's struggles weren't just about playing music, but about fighting to keep the Rolling Stones alive through fights with Mick Jagger, near breakups, and the pressures of fame. Once, when Mick wanted to change the band's style to a pop one, Keith screamed in the studio, smashed his guitar, and stormed out, tears streaming down his face, feeling betrayed by his brainchild. But he came back, mended, reconciled, and continued, because the music was the only thing that kept him alive. Keith Richards was never satisfied with what he had achieved. The greatest achievement he always strived for was not awards or recognition, but a sense of absolute freedom in his music. He wanted every note he played to be a statement, a way to tell his story without explanation. From his early days in Dartford, when he and Mick Jagger listened to the blues of Muddy Waters and Chuck Berry, Keith dreamed of creating a unique sound, unlike anyone else. He spent hours in the studio, experimenting with the open tuning that became his signature. But more than anything, Keith yearned to leave a legacy, not just for his fans, but for his own children. He wanted them to see their father not as a drug-addicted rock star, but as a man who lived life to the fullest, who fought the darkness and emerged victorious. There were nights when he would stay up all night, writing until his hands bled from strumming for so long, just to finish a song that he believed would touch someone's heart. He once told his wife, Patty Hansen, that he wasn't afraid of dying, but he was afraid of not finishing what he had started. For Keith, achievement wasn't a destination, but a never-ending journey, where he continued to push the limits of himself and of rock and roll. Keith Richards' love and marriage is a complicated story, full of passion, pain, and ultimately redemption. Before meeting Patty Hansen, Keith was in a long-term relationship with Anita Pallenberg, a strong and wild woman with whom he had 3 children: Marlon, Angela, Dandelion, and Tara. His relationship with Anita was a whirlwind of love, drugs, and chaos. They met in 1967, when Anita was the girlfriend of Brian Jones, another member of the Rolling Stones. The betrayal ended Keith and Brian's friendship, but Keith had no regrets. In Anita, he found a true companion who understood the madness of his soul. But the love also brought deep sadness. Tara's death was a huge blow, and their relationship. Keith was soon torn apart by addiction and endless arguments. They separated in 1979, though they maintained a strange connection for the rest of Anita's life. Keith was at his lowest point in life when he met Patty Hansen in 1979, addicted, lonely, and lost. Patty, a beautiful and strong American model, entered his life as a light at the end of the tunnel. They married on December 18, 1983, Keith's 40th birthday, and she became his rock. But the marriage to Patty was not without its sorrows. Keith hurt Patty with relapses and unexplained nights of disappearance. One time, Patty found him unconscious in the living room, with his guitar still in his hands, and she cried, not out of anger, but out of fear of losing him. Keith knew he owed Patty so much, and his greatest sorrow in love was the feeling that he could not be the husband she deserved. Keith Richards was the father of 5 children: Marlon, Angela, Tara, deceased, Theodora, and Alexandra. To Marlon and Angela, born from a relationship with Anita Pallenberg, Keith admits he was not a model father. In the 1970s, when he was addicted to drugs, Marlon, the eldest, often had to care for himself and his younger sister. Keith once recalled that Marlon, then 7, dragged him out of bed when he was drunk, yelling that he needed to get sober to take Angela to school. Looking into his son's eyes, Keith felt like a failure. But Marlon did not blame his father. He grew up strong, independent, and is now a talented artist. Angela, known as Dandelion, also found her own path, though she told Keith she wished he had been there for her more when she was young. The loss of Tara, Keith never fully got over. With his daughters Theodora and Alexandra, who he had with Patty Hansen, Keith tried to make up for his past. Theodora, born in 1985, and Alexandra, born in 1986, grew up in a much more stable environment than their siblings. Keith took the girls to concerts, taught them guitar, and spent time telling stories about his life. But he knew he could not erase the memories of the years he had been absent from Marlon and Angela's lives, and that troubled him. He loved them all, but each one was a different face of joy and sadness in his heart. Patty Hansen, Keith's wife of more than 4 decades, understood the sadness he carried. She spoke of Tara's death with tenderness and poignancy. Keith never really got over it. He held it in his heart, like a heavy stone, and every time he played the guitar, I knew he was trying to tell Tara something. For Patty, Keith's greatest sorrow was not just the loss of his son, but the feeling that he had not been able to protect the people he loved from the storms of his life. She recalled that one time, when Keith woke up from a nightmare, he held her tight and whispered, "I don't want you to have to put up with me anymore." Patty did not see these sorrows as burdens. To her, they were proof that Keith, despite his seemingly carefree appearance, was a sensitive and thoughtful man. She once told him, "You don't have to be perfect, Keith. You just have to be you, and that's enough for me." Those words were Keith's greatest comfort, helping him find peace in his final years. Looking back at the life of Keith Richards, from a boy growing up on the mean streets of Dartford to a rock and roll legend of the world, he is the embodiment of survival and resilience. His greatest sadness, the loss of Tara, is the source of his haunting melodies, but also the motivation for him to constantly create. His career, with its resounding successes and painful failures, is a testament to the power of passion. Love and marriage, though full of ups and downs, brought him Patty Hansen, the woman who helped him find himself again. His children, each in their own way, are pieces in the picture of his life, from pain to joy. Patty's words are like a lamp that illuminates the dark corners of Keith's soul, reminding him that he is not alone. At the age of 81, Keith Richards still holds the guitar, still plays music, and still lives, not because he does not have sadness, but because he has learned to turn it into strength to move forward. At 81, with his hair white and his hands no longer as agile as they were in his youth, Keith Richards still stands there, guitar in hand, like a warrior who has never given up. He does not try to erase his sadness or hide his scars. Instead, he embraces them, letting them become an inseparable part of who he is. His life is not a fairy tale with a perfect ending, but an endless rock song, loud, chaotic, but full of life. Keith once said in an interview that he is not afraid of death because he has survived it too many times to be afraid of it anymore. What he cherishes most, perhaps, is that he has lived true to himself, without compromise, without surrender, even though the price to pay is sometimes too high. With Patty by his side, with his children growing up in their own way, and with millions of fans still singing